Long time no see. It's Courtside with Campbell Knezovic, with Elijah Campbell and Michelle Knezovic. Been a little crazy around here. We've had to take a short hiatus, so that means there's a lot of basketball to get into. February is right around the corner. It's bubble season. There is some very meaningful basketball being played right now. And man, the weeks it has been, I am glad to be back. I know, Michelle, I know you're glad to be back. Tennessee's gone through a lot. Vanderbilt's season has gone off the ledge and has completely face-planted. And your Kentucky Wildcats look like contenders. And the Auburn Tigers, and not in football and basketball, are the number one team in the nation. A lot's gone on, Michelle.
Elijah, we chatted this afternoon, and basically we knew we were going to record this week. We had a couple busy last 2 weeks at the station, and we're like, okay, this is good time. There's been a lot that's happened. And we're like, so what has happened since we last recorded? And then we're like, oh, in this game too? In that game. Oh, and this coach said this, and oh, my 68 teams, yeah, we got to scratch about 10 of those for the bubble watch. It has been a roller coaster. This is probably, though, my favorite time in college basketball because it's really a pivotal point when you're really in the heat of conference play. You know, the SEC has been incredible. Auburn, they almost lost it to Missouri the other night, but still undefeated in the SEC, number one team in the nation right now. You know, we've seen Tennessee, Kentucky. We've seen Tennessee, LSU. Last time we were on the pod, we were talking about how LSU is the dark horse in the SEC. You know, now Auburn is on another level.
Yeah.
They're the team to beat, exactly.
They're the team to beat right now. And, I mean, it's wild to think that, Bruce Pearl's come into this conference for two different football schools and has made them number one for the first time in their program's history. And which, ironically enough, the first game after Bruce Pearl became number one at Tennessee, they lost to Vanderbilt on the road. And then the first game he made Auburn number one, they almost lost on the road to Missouri, which was a horrific loss. I mean, that was, I think Auburn shot like 30%, but still won the game. That's just how much better they are than Missouri. Not many teams survive shooting like that. But Michelle, you look at the SEC right now. Auburn.
Wait, really quick before we go round robin in the SEC. Just talking about Bruce Pearl, another big storyline that actually just kind of developed this week is Chris Mack out at Louisville. So they fired their AD earlier this season. Now it just was announced yesterday, and Bruce Pearl is actually on a lot of the watch lists of him potentially moving to be the head coach at the University of Louisville. So a lot of my sources in Kentucky say that this is not a fake. This is not a hoax. Is he interviewing? Is he not? Like, it's pretty real that he could be a potential contender for that job. So I just want to sneak that in there really quick.
All right. So when you say potential contender, like there's mutual interest on both sides, perhaps, because obviously, the talks are, we're not going to see a lot of reports about actual talks being done until after the season, of course, especially considering that Auburn's having the season they're having. But because, I mean, if you think about it, if you're Bruce Pearl, that makes a lot of sense because Louisville is a much better basketball job than Auburn is.
Well, and I'm just looking up the tweet right now. But no, Auburn writer confirms Pearl/U of L dance. Hundreds of Auburn fans who wrote me and said, no chance, now can go yell at a certain reporter. So this was from Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio. So the original tweet is Justin Hokanson. Commentary: Louisville has reached out to Bruce Pearl camp. The interest is real. The momentum is now for Auburn administration to fulfill Pearl's wish list, and it needs to happen yesterday. But to your point, I was having this discussion with somebody else, and they were saying, oh my God, well, Auburn's number one in the country. Like, why would he leave Auburn? Why would he go to Louisville? But just because Louisville hasn't been, Chris Mack's been there and hasn't really been able to do much. He did take the team over just after kind of a lot of crap was happening with them and really just wasn't able to turn it around as quickly as obviously the school would have helped. Also, they fired their athletic director. So usually when a new athletic director is going to come in as well, they also still haven't filled that position. You're going to have different, wants and needs. And it's not really a surprise that he would probably want to bring in his own coach for the team, but Louisville is a way better basketball program than Auburn is. Yes, they're number one in the country, but the only reason they're on the map now is because Bruce Pearl took over them a number of years ago. But Louisville historically has been a phenomenal basketball program.
Yeah. It's a basketball school. And at the end of the day, Auburn will always be a football school. Like that's the unfortunate truth for Bruce Pearl and Auburn is that if as long as he's there, even though the team is this good, they'll always take a back seat to football. That's how almost every SEC schools, except for Kentucky. Kentucky is like the lone basketball school survivor in the SEC. Football is just bigger everywhere else. And when he goes to Louisville, like that team is the team in town all year long, 24/7, 365. It's a fantastic basketball job with fantastic facilities, resources. And if he's able to recruit the same way he has at Auburn and a lot of other places, then I like his chances. I like his chances at winning at Louisville. I like his chances at winning at Maryland because that might be another place that his name might pop up. I don't foresee seeing Bruce Pearl staying at Maryland forever. The biggest thing with the Louisville job is before Chris Mack was Rick Pitino, and with Rick Pitino came all these NCAA violations. How 100% positive is that school wanting to do, or wanting, like, how 100% positive are they in terms of being sure that they want to get back in bed with another coach who has a lengthy history with the NCAA? Bruce Pearl and the NCAA's relationship, you could say, would be pretty adversarial. I don't think either. They have definitely been at odds with Tennessee, and with his days at Boston College as a grad assistant. Like, I mean, it's lengthy. It's very, very lengthy. And how sure are they that they want to do that? I think it's worth the risk if you're Louisville. And if you're Bruce Pearl, obviously, if they're willing to take that risk, you should be willing to take that job. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really a, big topic. Obviously, we're still in the middle of the season right now, which I did think was a little weird, that it's just been so public now. I'm assuming Chris Mack's going to finish out coaching, or if there's an interim coach. I honestly, all this news has just been really breaking throughout the last couple of days. I'm not updated on what they're going to do on that front. I really don't see them hiring somebody until after the season is over, but this is going to be ongoing, and it's only January 27th. Give it 2 months now. We could be talking about finalized, right? End of March.
Yeah.
If those teams are out of the tournament by then, we could be talking about finalized deals, new coaching movement, which oh God, you already know I'm not a big Bruce Pearl fan if he's the Louisville coach. Oh God.
Could you imagine John Calipari and Bruce Pearl in the same state once again? Oh my!
I will say though, like, it would just make that rivalry like all the more better.
Oh, it would be. It would be. And like, Louisville's a program right now that's dead. It's dead.
Yeah, they're irrelevant.
Enthusiasm. And
they're
what
relevant
does
because their name is Louisville. They are relevant because their name is Louisville.
Yeah, and they have a history. They have the history. They have the facilities. It's Louisville basketball. And like, there's no coach on the planet that just injects enthusiasm into a program the way Bruce Pearl does. Everywhere he's gone, he has injected enthusiasm into those programs and have gotten them to overachieve at times too. Like, he's the perfect man for that job. I mean
he's made
really wants it.
Auburn relevant.
Oh yeah, and not just more than relevant. Right? As of right now, they're
Final
the
Four relevant. Like, yeah, in the Final Four in 18-19, I think they beat Kentucky to advance to the Final Four. Yeah, so that's going to be a big storyline to follow. Whether you're an Auburn fan, whether you're not, just a big one in college basketball. Or if you said, if he could go to Maryland, or just these coaching movements. And also too, we're at a weird time where we're seeing that like first level, or like I'm trying to figure out like a way to say this. So like that top tier of coaches, you've got like Coach K retiring, you've got Roy Williams retiring. I'm sure Boeheim will be kind of after that. It's almost like that over, and the new generation of younger coaches really coming up, like Bruce Pearl, huge name. Cal has kind of been in that mix, but only because he got the Kentucky job. Like, he's a little bit older, but the guy from Bama who's escaping my mind right now.
Nate Oates.
Nate Oates, right? I'm sure I could see him making a jump in schools. Some people were talking about Tennessee, but I don't think Rick Barnes is going anywhere for Tennessee,
I
at
don't think
least.
so. And I don't think Tennessee's going to be that eager to part with Rick Barnes.
No, I agree. And we were going to talk about the SEC, and I totally just went on the coaching tangent, but that's okay.
Because they had to go, and that's a big storyline, and that's going to be the biggest job available in the offseason, Louisville and Maryland. And of course, Bruce Pearl's his name, I promise you, will be in both.
Yeah.
The team that he coaches now, Auburn's 19-1. I mean, they have
First, they'll just win a
resume
national
right
championship,
now.
check, and then just head out the way.
And then bounce. Yeah, exactly. While he's at it, and like, this is a team that actually can do it, Michelle. Like, that's the wild thing about it. I think you saw that, like, is Auburn played a really difficult non-conference schedule. They won what I thought might have been the most competitive tournament in like the early season tournament circuit. And they didn't win it, but like the game they've lost is that double overtime game to UConn, who's going to be a tournament team. UConn's a really solid team, and they turn around and beat Loyola Chicago by 9, who is a really good team, a team I think we'll see in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, even though they've kind of taken a little bit of a dip. They handled Murray State at home, and then conference play started. They demolished LSU, one of the best defensive teams in the country. They won at Alabama, which it doesn't mean as much now because Alabama's kind of taken a few steps back. But then the Kentucky game, they beat Kentucky at home, and Kentucky, I think, going into that game was the best team in college basketball. I picked Kentucky to win that game, not college basketball, the SEC. Picked Kentucky to win that game, and it's just hard to win that game when Auburn is shooting almost 70% from 2. This is a team that can absolutely dominate you from 2, and Jabari Smith might have made himself a top 5 pick with how well he's played this year.
Yeah, the Auburn win definitely stung a lot.
I bet for you, that one definitely hurt a little bit. Nationally televised game, 2 top 10 teams, a chance to get the number 1 spot in the conference. That's a tough one.
So obviously right now, so this game was last Saturday. Obviously a lot going on, right? And I was actually covering the Titans-Bengals game. And that whole morning I was just running around making sure that like had everything ready for the game. It was a mid-afternoon game. And in my head, there's so much basketball going on right now. There's NFL playoffs. We're literally in the middle of just craziness right now. And when I'm not living in Lexington, it's a little bit harder to like keep up, especially when my main priority for the weekend was working this divisional round. And so I'm in the press booth or whatever, and Joe Rexrode from our morning show, who is just a diehard college basketball, us three share that love, that passion. He's like, we're in the buffet line. He's like, Michelle, your Cats are going to lose today. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm thinking in my head, like, oh, this is a later game. I didn't miss this game, whatever. He's like, yeah, they're down by 8 and there's like a minute left. I'm like, what are you talking? What is happening? And I run over to the closest TV and I get to watch, it was about an 8-point game. I get to watch about the last 50 seconds or something of it. And I honestly didn't see a majority of the game, and I didn't even go back to watch it. I think Severe Wheeler got hurt early in the game and ended up being out, which is a huge loss for them because him and Ty Washington handling the ball it's night or day. I mean, Kentucky played, who did they play the other night? Oh, Mississippi State went into overtime, and Ty Washington was out, and then Severe Wheeler, I think he had a couple fouls, so he wasn't playing, and they had to have Davion Mintz hold the ball, but then he had a couple fouls. So they had Grant, no, I always forget his name. Kellen Grady. I don't know. I always forget. Kellen Grady. I always want to say Grant. He's great, but they were having him handle the ball, which was fine, but it's just completely a different ball game when you have Ty Washington or Severe Wheeler at the 1. So he didn't play in the Auburn game. And so obviously that one stung, but I saw like the last like 50 seconds of that game, and they're trying to get a shot up, and then there's a turnover, and then there's another turnover, and I'm like, okay, I'm just over this, But they're definitely the team to beat. I thought Kentucky hung in with them, especially because of the significant pieces that they had missing. And I would love to see them play each other with 2 fully healthy squads, which hopefully we will, in the SEC tournament. And I think they play them again one more time this season.
I believe so. I think it's a possibility. I have the schedule pulled up right now. Unfortunately, they don't.
They don't. Okay. So SEC tournament, ideally.
So which would be, and if they do see each other in the SEC tournament, it could be in the last game of the SEC tournament if you're
Yeah,
catching my
that was
there.
yes, that's kind of what I was alluding to. I
Mhm.
mean, but for years, the SEC tournament was an easy lock for Kentucky, and then they automatically had a good seed heading into the tournament. But in these recent years, you've had that Tennessee team where you got Grant Williams, you got Admiral Schofield, then you had the Auburn team with Okereke that year he tore his ACL. You've had Alabama last year, won the SEC, and now you've got LSU coming up this year, who's got a nasty defensive, scrappy team.
As it gets on that
It
side of the
has
ball.
this SEC basketball conference has become I mean, I have all the confidence saying better than the ACC. At least this year, we've got 5 or 6 teams
Sure. Yeah.
in top 25, but traditionally it's been ACC number 1 basketball, SEC number 1 football, but SEC's taken over on all fronts, Elijah.
It has. I think I have my field of 65 or 68. It's not 65 anymore. Field of 68 in front of me right now, and I do not have more than I have 3 teams in the ACC in because I don't have North Carolina in,
No,
and we'll
I was going to say you
at the
wouldn't have
very
them
end.
in. Let me see if I can guess. Okay, so you have
Yeah.
Duke.
Yep, that's my
Okay,
presumed ACC winner.
yeah, yeah. Okay, Duke, Virginia.
Not Virginia. I do not have
No,
Virginia in.
Virginia Tech.
Not Virginia Tech. However, the unfortunate thing with Virginia Tech is, man, if there may be like 6 different plays away from actually being in contention of being in the tournament. They've lost so many close games.
I know, and maybe that's why, like in my head, it's like when you know those teams are good, even though they like are right there on
Yeah.
winning a game, but you're like, no, they're a good team. So in your head, that's always the worst when you know a team's good, but because of their just wins and loss
Their
schedules,
luck.
it doesn't matter.
Bad,
Yeah,
bad
their
luck.
luck or a
Yeah.
stupid foul at the end of the game where somebody shoots 2 shots. Oh my God, who? Okay, who do you have? The ACC. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, do you have Syracuse?
I do not. I
Yeah, I
do
was
not.
gonna say you definitely don't have them. Okay, now I'm like, okay, just tell me.
Miami and Wake Forest.
Oh, duh.
Wake Forest,
Miami.
sneaky good year. They're 17-4. Steve Forbes was one of the better coaching hires. That was my favorite coaching hire in that cycle, was them getting Steve Forbes. And it's taken, what, 2 years for them to have them turned around? They'll be in the NCAA tournament because of that man. That man can coach.
And I mean, I haven't really paid super close attention to the ACC. It's
Uh,
interesting because I'll watch the Louisville games or the Syracuse games just because those are the teams I know more familiar with. But it's like these under the radar ACC teams that are coming up, and the historic ACC teams not rising to the occasion. Your Virginias, your Louisvilles, your Syracuses. I will say this: Jim Boeheim, that team always finds a way to make it into the tournament.
they do. They find a way. And they'll have to
They
get hot.
find a way.
Offensively, that team's more than good enough to actually get into this tournament. They just cannot stop a nosebleed, and it's hard to watch on a daily
Yeah.
basis. But
They also
uh,
have like Jesse Edwards at the 5, which he's a super tall guy. I think he's like 7 foot
uh,
something, but he's just not like built. He's very like lanky and skinny still, and still can get pushed around in the paint, which is
grow into that body,
last
yeah.
couple of years. Yeah.
But we'll definitely get into who's in and out in our first rendition of the Bubble Watch. I'm excited to get into that. I have definitely ruined some sheets of paper with that. But last thing on the SEC before we take one quick break, I want to give this proposition to you. So your 2 options, Kentucky and Auburn or the field, who's winning the SEC championship?
um, I'm gonna, and this is not me being biased at all. Give me Kentucky for that. Not having Severe Wheeler in the game, I don't
Okay.
think people realize the significance of that when they
Mhm.
played Auburn, and for it to be such a close game. It ended up the box score. I think they ended up winning by
No,
close
we
to
not.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say close to 10 points. But if you actually like, so I looked back at it, and it was really just a couple plays at the end. It's like those giveaway points at the end where the game was actually
Right.
closer than that. But for Kentucky to be that close to them as the number 1 team in the country, they're at their peak right now. This is not me saying that they're going to plummet now, but I mean, hey, that has been the story though of the number 1 teams so far this season. It's like they get number one, like Purdue, and then it's like lose. But no, I mean, I think the fact that Kentucky was even able to hang with them with the injuries they had on their team, I do think that Kentucky will be able to beat them in the SEC tournament. And I am going to call it, Oscar Tshiebwe, man, he is a special player.
He's got
For
the
me,
front
he
runner
is.
for the Wooden. I
was just going to say he is at least my front runner for National Player of the Year. He finally got 20 points and 20 rebounds, but this kid's averaging about 16 rebounds a game and is just dominating the boards. The other night against Mississippi State, it was crazy. He had like 7 rebounds in the first 6 minutes. It's insane.
That is an insane number too. And I guess if we're betting too, I would probably just go to the field in an SEC tournament just because I love the middle of the SEC this year. Arkansas is finally getting better. Arkansas has had some horrific losses, some inexcusable horrific losses, but they're finally picking it up a little bit. They're finally starting to gel a little bit. I still love Mississippi State. Mississippi State gave Kentucky all they could handle the other night. In that same game that you mentioned, I think Iverson Molinar has got to be considered as an all SEC player, like a first team all SEC player, not just all SEC. That guy deserves to be on the first team all SEC. Sneaky good NBA draft prospect as well. So I still like Tennessee. I'm not giving up on them yet. I think offensively they're picking it up enough. They're still not where they need to be. They're still 48th ranked in offensive efficiency on KenPom. Still a top 5 defensive team. But the 3-point shots are starting to fall a little bit. They're starting to pick up a little bit of momentum with shooting. They're figuring it out just a little bit. I don't know how the game against Florida ends yesterday if Colin Castleton was healthy and able to play. That guy makes a difference as a defensive anchor. But Florida without Castleton is still a decent defensive team, and Tennessee was still able to put up a pretty good amount of points without having to rely too much on the 3-point line. They hit 11 and they shot 40%, but they didn't have to rely too much on it. Kennedy Chandler starting to figure it out a lot more as well. We'll go ahead and take a quick break, pay some bills here, and we come back. There's a coach in Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, who might be losing it just a little bit. A team that once had a promising season with a very talented roster is staring down the barrel of the NIT, or maybe even worse. We'll get into that on the other side as you're listening to Courtside with Campbell Knezovic right here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. That's right. We mentioned it before the break. And when you hear 3-6 Mafia, you know what we're going to talk about is going to include either Ja Morant's greatness or the demise of the Memphis Tigers. And right now, unfortunately, for my Memphis fans out there, shout out David James, it is the latter. I mean, it is a dire situation in Memphis right now. This is a team, Michelle, as you're listening to Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic, that had aspirations of not just making the NCAA tournament, which they haven't done under Penny Hardaway since he has been named head coach a couple of years ago, be a top 25 team, which they have barely been all year long after having the number 1 recruiting class in the country this summer. But they might not make the NCAA tournament. As of now, I don't have them in the NCAA tournament. I think their only shot now is to make it through by winning the AAC tournament. Michelle, it's a team that is sitting at 10-8. And they have losses against SMU at home, an 8-point loss in which they're down double digits most of the game. Yuck. A loss at a bad East Carolina team. Yuck. A loss on the road to a bad UCF team. Yuck. They also lost to Tulane on the road this year as the conference opener to kick off their AAC play.
Lost to Georgia.
Lost to Georgia, yeah. That's not even to mention the loss at Georgia, which might be the worst one in terms of KenPom, which it is. Georgia's sitting right now ranked 210 when it comes to KenPom rankings. All of that is gross. What's also gross is losing their composure now after the loss to SMU, a team that Memphis was favored by 6 points, a team that Memphis is better than roster-wise, as they are almost every team not named in that conference. Another disappointing loss, and Jeff Calkins, media member in Memphis, asked Penny Hardaway if he still believes that he can get the job done as a head coach. And here's the very interesting response from Penny Hardaway afterwards.
I think the one thing I can say to this media, because this media gets kind of up sometimes when it comes to me, we don't have our full roster. Y'all know we don't have our full roster. Stop asking me stupid questions about if I feel like I can do something. If I had my roster like they did, then I feel like I can do whatever I want to do. I'm coaching really hard. My boys are playing really hard. I'm not embarrassed about nothing. We have 4 freshmen starting. Y'all need to act like it. Act like we got 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds out here trying to learn how to play against 22, 23, and 24-year-old guys. Come on, man. Stop disrespecting me, bro. Like, don't do that. I work too hard. I work way too hard for that. Y'all write all these articles about me, and all I do is work. We got young kids on the floor. They got young kids on the floor.
Wow. Blaming the youth and the inexperience. Whatever. You're not the only guy playing with freshmen in the country, dude.
It's become
like we've talked about this year too. Like, they're young. There's going to be some lumps, but I feel like this is more than just taking some lumps, Michelle.
well, I mean, college basketball has turned into, I mean, now with the transfer portal and how players are able to move just more frequently, and it's just become a really big resource. It hasn't been just so in the spotlight, but I mean, basketball has turned into the one and done.
Yeah.
And that's what kids want to do. They want to make it to the NBA. You have to do, especially for these high level recruits, you have to do the 1 year post high school so you can go into the draft. That's what it's become. You see Cal do it. You see Coach K do it. You don't see that. They get number 1 recruiting classes too. These are amazing players, but then it's on the coach. You got to know how to coach these young kids. And for him to lose his composure like that, first off, there's a lot going on there, a lot to unpack. But second off, it makes me I'm going to relate this to Coach Vrabel and just like the differences.
Uh-huh.
We talked about this Titans team all season and how they historically broke the record of most players ever activated on an NFL roster, like over 90 players. And there were so many questions about, you lost this player, you lost this starting player. And he's like, we're just talking about the guys here. We got to get it done with the guys here. Like, he looked at his coaching job as, I got to have the best people who are available. My stepdad's a coach. He always says, what's the best type of player? A player who's available, right? Yeah. You can't look at if this player's hurt or that player's hurt or something like that. And then for him to kind of break down like that, obviously it just shows that, I mean, hey, I don't know what's going on in that locker room. None of us know what's going on in that locker room. We can infer, we can make speculation just based off a lot of the things we've kind of seen. Him speaking out earlier this year about their players wanting to only play for themselves and not for the team. And then now we have this incident just, I think a week ago. It just doesn't seem like things are solid or stable over there. And it kind of seems like the losing is getting to him a little bit.
No, for sure.
But I don't think that was that was a very fair question asked by the reporter. Very kind of just open-ended.
Yeah,
he could have just said, he could have just not answered it if he.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he probably tells his players when you're on the court, you keep your composure. Well, it's important to keep it off the court too. I mean, like, he just completely lost his marbles at like you said, a very, very fair question. And it just sounds like there's a lot of excuse making. Like, he obviously hasn't lived up to what the promise was when he got there, outside of getting big recruits, because he's gotten big recruits each year. They've never made the NCAA tournament. Yeah, winning the NIT is a good accomplishment. I don't like dumping all over the NIT, because I think if they were a half-court shot away last year from actually being in the NCAA tournament, last year was a good accomplishment. But this year, you had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. There was zero excuse.
And you're not in a Power 5 conference.
Exactly. They're in a very winnable conference.
Yes.
A very winnable conference. Wichita
Don't
State.
Get me wrong. You've got great teams in that conference. Cincinnati always brings it. Houston's an amazing team. They were deep into the tournament last year, but you are not playing 5 to 6 tournament level teams twice a year. I mean, you see Tennessee playing Kentucky twice, Auburn playing Tennessee twice, Kentucky twice, Alabama twice. All of these teams, we said 5 or 6 SEC teams we have in the tournament. I mean,
those are all
that's the thing. When you have the number 1 recruiting class in the country and you're not in a Power 5 conference, so you have the ability to get a lot of wins under your belt, especially in the conference. And it just shows that it's not just because you have the best players in the country, they're still young. They're still 18 years old, 19 years old. High school basketball is a lot different than college basketball. These kids probably had the ball in their hands 99% of the times because they're the point guard, they're the three, they're the four on their high school team. And now they got to learn how to do all of this off the ball and actually be a team player. And they're young. It's hard. He's right in the sense of they're playing against 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds. Now with the COVID year and then the grad year, you've got some kids who are 25, 26 out there playing against them. Yeah, they've got just experience under their belt, but it's also not okay to be throwing F-bombs around, especially when you do have a young team, and showing them, because you know they all saw it, showing them that you're losing it. And then now that you don't have a stable ground, it's just, is this the rise and the fall? I mean, we were talking about this on Robbie and Rex Road. Do you even think Penny Hardaway will be the coach there next year, whether he steps away or whether he's fired?
Yeah, I think he'll be there just because there's that connection. They're at least getting players, and the community's at least loyal to him.
Yeah.
I think that buys him time. I think if he was anybody else, I don't think he does. Like, that's the crazy thing. But my biggest issue with the whole thing, like reacting the way he did, is the history. Like, you can't say a couple of years ago when you come to Memphis, yeah, we won all the smoke. Like, it's Memphis versus everybody else, blah, blah, blah. That's great. Like, that's great. That's exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. You want your coach to have that kind of, I
Yeah.
guess, hard-headedness and that type of expectation for himself and the program. But when you've been presented with a challenge, you can't just shrivel away. And that's what he did. He shriveled away and he cried about it. And like, that's what would frustrate me as a Memphis fan, is you can't say that you want all the smoke. And then when the smoke happens, like, okay, just kidding, I don't really want it.
Well,
It's too young. Like, it's like she just shriveled. And I think that's the disappointing thing for me.
Well, and unfortunately, we're in a sports world where losing is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be able to handle it. And also, being in the media as a Division I basketball coach is also inevitable. You're going to have to speak to the media after a loss, after a bad loss, after your season ends, after you have 4 losses in a row, after you're not up to the expectations. And yeah, I know as media members, we always want like the raw, honest answer, but now him reacting like that, oh baby, the smoke's going to keep on coming.
Yeah, he made it worse. He really did make it worse for himself. And that's the frustrating thing.
Well, you gave everybody an inside look onto what actually is going on, whereas some coaches have learned to, you know, they're able to shut that locker room and go out and just kind of put on their coaching hat for a second, and you really don't have any idea what's going on in the locker room or any of that. But him doing that is kind of giving everybody a free look into, oh, this is getting bad. And be prepared for reporters to ask about that, you know, moving forward. Be prepared to be on Twitter, be prepared to have maybe your staff say something, your boss say something, your players say something. And now with social media, you say something once in a press conference on air, that makes a headline, makes a statement. You're going to be seeing it for a while.
It becomes a distraction. And I think that's exactly what he created, was a distraction. They finally bounced back, and they got a win. They got a win. They had to hold on for a win, I should say, against Tulsa, who is the worst team in that conference, who is dead last in that conference. Tulsa team that has yet to win a game in that conference this year had to hold on to win that game. And it's like, I agree with you to the point where like it's a distraction, and it's hard to avoid. That's not the only team, I guess, in the state that's maybe disappointed a little bit this year with a coach that used to be in the NBA. Talked about Vanderbilt at the very beginning of the show very vaguely. We'll go into a little more detail now. Like, last night, they completed the sweep of getting swept by South Carolina, a team that is very comparable, a program that's in a state that is pretty comparable to Vanderbilt, very evenly matched. And a 9-point loss on the road last night where they couldn't keep from turning the ball over. They blew that game at home against South Carolina. There's not going to be many opportunities to win games in the SEC and have building blocks for the future. South Carolina was one of those very winnable games. They're only games they've won in the SEC. They have a very impressive one at Arkansas, which January 4th seems like a long time ago now for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, almost a month ago.
Much different team now. And then the worst team in the conference, Georgia, which is going to be the punching bag for everybody in the SEC. What is when you watch Vanderbilt, like what's the one thing that really sticks out as to why they just can't make that extra baby step to get above the South Carolinas of the conference?
Well, I think Scottie Pippen needs help. I mean, in the Kentucky game, when Kentucky came into Rupp a couple weeks ago now, I think at halftime he had half their points.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, it's not manageable for an entire season. He can't be, especially in the SEC, like he's not going to be able to sustain this. I mean, I think we were reading his stats for the South Carolina game, and it was like 24 points, maybe like 8 assists, but then it was like 7 turnovers.
Yeah, 5 assists, 7 turnovers for him last night.
Okay. Yeah, so 5 assists and about 24 points, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right at 24 points.
So you want him to have the ball in his hands a majority of the time for Vanderbilt. But he's also having to shoot it. He's also having to drive to the rim. He's having to do a lot for this team. And yeah, in high school it can work. You can have one superstar and you can go pretty much undefeated or something like that. Well,
right.
Undefeated's a little drastic, but you know what I mean. You can be a majority of your games. A majority of your games. Whereas in college, yeah, you can have one superstar, but you really got to have a lot of other people who are also at least giving you something. We really have, I mean, it's just such a loss that Liam, that big transfer, hasn't been able to play this year because, I mean, you've seen his film. He's played at Iowa, or no, Minnesota.
Minnesota and Drake,
not Iowa. And he's a good player. He's huge, first off, which would be amazing for them. They have Quentin, who's their 5 right now, but he's not compared to Liam. No. I think having him activated would be huge. But I think mostly, first off, you cannot have 11 turnovers in the second half. They were up by about 10. They had that game, and then you have 11 turnovers in the second half alone. Can't have that. Second off, Scottie Pippen needs help. He needs somebody who's going to, and they have glimpses of it, but he can't hold this team all on his back and win all of these games. He's a phenomenal player, and I still think he's up there for SEC Player of the Year. Unfortunately, he just can't get anything out of a lot of his other teammates.
And a lot of it, too, is like Scottie Pippen Jr., he's regressed a little bit. Like, he still scores, and he still has, like, the majority of, like, that scoring burden, which is way too much for one player. He definitely needs help, and that's why his assist numbers have gone down. I mean, they shot decently. They shot pretty well because they shot 40% from 3 last night. Probably could have shot more, but, like, they need help inside, too. They don't create a lot of inside opportunities. They miss a lot of inside opportunities. And that's like one of my biggest gripes with them too. Like last night, they were under 50% from 2. You know, you can't shoot almost better from 3 than you can from 2 if you're only shooting 17 threes and 32 pointers. Yeah. The math won't math there. You know what I'm saying? They blow too many opportunities, and there's just not a lot of depth too. Like in the Arkansas game, Trey Thomas came off the bench, lit it up. Absolutely had a great game. He hit 2 threes the other night, but that's about all that he's able to provide.
They need consistency from it, whether it be, you know, a rotation of a couple players, at least somebody who can, you know, be another double-digit scorer for the team. Like in the Kentucky game, they're not going to win the game, but somebody else has got to step up when Scottie Pippen's had more than half your points. Yeah, than combined of the 5 other players on the court or who had played in that half. But I do have a question for you. This has also been kind of a topic of discussion, I guess you could say, because now this is Jerry Stackhouse's 3rd season. You know, Jared at our station feels confident that he thinks that they should fire him. We've talked about it on our show. Joe thinks that he deserves, you know, more time. It is only his 3rd season. This really is the first year we've been able to see his guys that he's recruited. What do you think?
I think he should get another year because the recruiting class is better. I mean, I think he needs more of that. Like this year's team is not very deep, and losing Liam Robbins was such a big blow. I don't think we'll see him back all year. I mean, from what I've been told, that he's been in a walking boot for a lot longer than people are normally in walking boots. Um, I don't know what the status is right now, but like he hasn't played a lot of college basketball, and like it's been well over a calendar year because
Yeah.
the injury was sustained, from my understanding, at his time at Minnesota, and that's you can't foresee. I think if he's able to be healthy this year, they don't get swept by South Carolina. Defensively, they would have been better. Offensively, you aren't, bottom 100 in the nation in effective field goal shooting. That
Even just
doesn't.
having that presence on the court.
Yeah, exactly. And it would just give you an extra option that they don't have right now. I don't think you can blame Jerry Stackhouse for that. I guess, would you put him on the hot seat? I mean, the seat would get warmer. I don't think you fire him, because that's how you just like wallow in mediocrity, is if you just keep firing people after very small stints as head coach. Like, it takes time to build a little program. It takes the weeest bit of patience. And I think Vanderbilt's going to have that with him, because the talent that's coming in this year is going to be better than what it's been the last several years. Like, it's like, that's the biggest thing too, is you can convince your fan base and the administration that the talent's going to get better, to just kind of bear with them. It has, and it's gotten better each year. That's the thing too. It's gotten better each year that he's been going. Like, you probably lose Scottie Pippen Jr. this year, and you have to revamp your team. But I mean, I think it's going to take more than 3 years to turn Vanderbilt basketball around from where it was when he got there, which was 0-18, the worst SEC basketball team I have ever seen in my life. Yeah,
Okay,
luckiest and the worst.
Oh. Yes, I have a couple points. Oh, okay. First off, I also think there could be a possibility that Scottie Pippen could stay another year, solely because he can make money off NIL, and if he's not a high enough pick in the lottery, or could see himself, getting a two-way deal in the G League or something. I just think he's still so small. So I think it's also going to depend on who else is, in the top 30, or if he would be maybe like a 31, 32 or something like that. I think it's going to kind of depend on just the pool of candidates for that. But I do think there could be a potential he could stay another year. Secondly, I think that, yes, he should be, Coach Jerry Stackhouse should be kind of on like the watch. Like, this is definitely going to be a pivotal recruiting season heading into the 2022-23 season. Mm-hmm. Third, his classes have gotten better, but the SEC as a whole in basketball has gotten a lot better. Like, better 2 steps up, a lot better, where you have 5 probably solid teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament. So not only has he gotten better, but also the conference as a whole has taken like 2 giant steps up. So I think you also have to take that into account. But another point I have, what if you switched around? Jerry Stackhouse is still the face of it, right? Mm-hmm. He was an NBA player. Young kids now coming up, high school kids, 18-year-old kids, could watch him in the NBA. He's played with some of these superstars. I'm pretty sure he played with Michael.
He did.
Is that wrong? He did play with Michael, yeah. So you can't tell me that doesn't help during recruiting, or him being, the face of the program, or him just playing the sport. Mm-hmm. But maybe that could be an option. Like, get somebody else on who's, I'm not saying he's a bad coach or anything, or a bad recruiter, but maybe somebody else who's a little bit more experienced in it.
Yeah.
In the coaching world.
Keeps, I guess, like, bringing in people who can help him on that side of. Yes. Which, I mean, he's still a good player developer. Player development was his thing. He coached really well in the G League, and was one of the reasons, like, the player development of Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam was one of the reasons why the Toronto Raptors were NBA champions a few years ago. Those guys developed under Jerry Stackhouse in their G League system. I think that's the biggest part of his resume goes back to that. And I think, to me, the biggest reason why you shouldn't fire him is for some of the reasons you laid out in terms of the talent coming in that's getting better, but also there's actual progress. Like, we're talking about them getting swept by South Carolina. It's disappointing because you're very evenly matched with them, and there's not going to be a ton of opportunities to get wins in the SEC. However, they're in a position right now, like, they're 2-5. They're only half a game behind Florida. They're still a game behind South Carolina. South Carolina can still lose a ton of games left. I still think Vanderbilt is better than Missouri. They're better than Georgia. They're every bit as good as Ole Miss right now. As of right now,
Missouri
they're 11th.
almost beat Auburn.
Yeah, and
So,
Missouri is pretty bad too. And that's the thing.
yeah.
Is like you can steal some wins. They stole a win at Arkansas. Like there's the progress here is that Vanderbilt will not finish last in the SEC, and that would be the first time since Jerry Stackhouse has been there that they will not have finished last. Not only will they not finish last, I think they'll still finish ahead of at least Missouri and Ole Miss. And then if you get lucky a couple games, you could be in the top 10 of the SEC, which based off the last 3 years of his work would be your best season yet. You just don't fire a coach after you have some actual visible progress.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, we're saying it like, oh, you're not last in the SEC, but that's actually really good for Vanderbilt considering where he took this team from.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah. And like you
got to be realistic with it.
You got to be realistic. All of this program building isn't done in a day.
Also, consistency. I think consistency in college athletics is so important, especially because with the transfer portal being so accessible now and kids just having the ability to essentially get on it one day and weigh their options. Look at what Mark Stoops has been able to do with Kentucky football. He's been the coach there for numerous amount of years. And then look at Tennessee football with the just frequent coaching overturn. I mean, I think Josh Heupel now, I really do think that he had a phenomenal first year. But I mean, that program, you gotta have some stability in there.
Mm-hmm. And that's how you end up building a program. You don't build it because there's many different voices overturned over a 5 to 10 year period.
Also, when you get a coach in, it takes them a while to get recruits. And by the time they're recruiting them, say they're a junior in high school, by the time they get there, that's still 2 years later. So this is really the first year we've been able to see that first recruiting class of him. So there still is, I agree with you. But I do think next year will be more of a pivotal year for him.
It's going to be a big year for him. And then, of course, it will be for Penny Hardaway as well. The seats getting just a little bit warmer, especially out in West Tennessee. When we come back, one quick trip for for the first rendition of the Bubble Watch this year. Teams are on the bubble. We're getting close to NCAA tournament time. Who do we have in the field so far? It's fun to break that down. We'll do that on the other side as you're listening to Campbell Knezovic right here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. If you listen to Darren Donick and Chase on our airwaves, weekdays 10 to 2, ESPN 102.5 The Game, you will notice that when you hear the Hoosiers theme, that means it's time to do a field of 68. It's time to reveal some teams as it's the first ever Bubble Watch on Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic. I'm Elijah Campbell. She's Michelle Knezovic. And February is next week, which means resume building season has been well upon us. And it's reaching its conclusion here in just a little over a month, because what comes after February? March. So
the March to March.
The March to March. And it begins right now. We'll go ahead real quick before we get to give and go. I have not seeded them yet. I'm in the process of seeding them, and I'll put that on theGameNashville.com whenever I finally take care of that tedious process. But the field is here. I have all the conference winners, some notable conference winners. I have Chattanooga winning the SoCon, getting them in the NCAA tournament. I think it's kind of theirs to lose, the deepest, most talented team in there. So locally, that's of interest there. Personally, I almost put the Campbell Fighting Camels in the Big South and said Longwood.
I wonder why.
Yeah, and they've never been to the NCAA tournament, and they actually have a really good offense this year. Can't stop a nosebleed. That's probably going to be what keeps them out of it. Keep an eye out.
Defense is quite the part of basketball.
It's what wins championships, allegedly. And then the OVC, an interesting conference around these parts. I have Murray State sealing the deal. Belmont not looking too hot. Lost to Murray State big time at home, and then got beat by Morehead State on the road. A possible revenge game for last year's OVC title game. We didn't see it. Belmont not playing their best ball right now. I have them not winning the OVC.
Yeah, Elijah, I'm unfortunately on the same train as that one. I actually was talking to Joe, our other basketball-minded friend at the station, about Belmont, and he was saying it's really sad how, Grayson, Luke, Nick, that they'll only have one NCAA tournament appearance in their time at Belmont, because obviously they made it the 2020 year and then there wasn't a tournament. And there were so many high hopes for this team this year, and just unfortunately, it's unfortunate because they had a great non-conference performance. I thought that they really showed out in Orlando. They had a couple big wins, right? They beat Iona and Drake.
Yeah, Iona and Drake. And Iona is a really good team who I have winning their conference easily. That's the easiest bet.
Yeah, under Louisville star Rick Pitino.
That's right.
And our episode coming full circle here.
Correct. Going to find himself in it again this year.
But I agree. I see a Morehead or a Murray State winning again. It was Morehead State last year. It was yes.
Yeah, Morehead State winning it last year, and Murray State's on a tear right now. They look dangerous.
Them and John Morant. They're just parallel, onward and upward.
Yep. John Morant won an NCAA tournament game there at Murray State.
Yes, he did. But it's unfortunate for that Belmont team because they had basically everybody returning. We talked so much about them at the beginning of the year and how the ceiling for this team is so high. But unfortunately, these conference games that they needed to get wins in, and if they're not going to win the OVC, I don't see them getting in. And then next year, they're heading to the Missouri Valley Conference, which is just going to be another tougher conference because Loyola is now moving too. Right?
Yeah, they'll be in the A10 next year.
So they'll be in the A10.
Bummed we're not going to get those twice a year. But
speaking of Loyola Chicago, I think they're going to be a third weekend team in March.
That's a dangerous team too. A lot of experience. They killed in the transfer portal, and always really good defensively. This year's team, I think, is better offensively than last year's Loyola team, which pulled off the shocker against Illinois.
Which Illinois just beat Michigan State by 2 nights ago or something like that. So it's like, it's bittersweet for Belmont, honestly. I mean, you want to see it for Casey Alexander. You want to see it for just this city, putting Belmont on the map. But I can't see them making it this year unless they win the OVC.
Yeah, I think that's where it is now. Right now, I have Belmont on my next 4 out because Belmont still has a pretty good resume compared to a bunch of other teams that I barely have in. We'll go start with my last 4 in. Number 1, Arkansas. Arkansas playing a lot better as of late. This is almost like a prediction pick too, as well as looking at their resume. They're playing their best basketball right now. I think the biggest thing that haunts them is that they are 3-2 in quad 3 games. That hurts a lot. They have some bad losses. If it comes down to some of the other teams I'm about to mention, those losses are going to be what can possibly pull them down. But what might keep them up is a high average win and a high average loss in terms of net ranking. And I love the way they're playing right now. They passed that eye testing with me too. They're starting to play their best basketball right now. It's going to be the best thing to happen to them. Like if they're going to have a bad conference loss like they did to Vanderbilt, having that on January 4th is much better than having it on February 4th or February 28th or March 4th in the last weekend of the season. A whole lot better to have that loss there than later on. I have Oregon as at number 2 in terms of the last 4 in. Oregon still has left a lot to be desired early on in the season, but like Arkansas, they're playing their best now. They have 2 quad 3 losses, both those coming early in the season, but they have a higher average win ranking than Arkansas and a better or lower average loss ranking than Arkansas as well. And then rounding it out is TCU and Michigan. TCU, a sneaky good team with a sneaky good resume. When it comes to a lot of these teams that are going to be vying for these last spots in the NCAA tournament, I like looking at the games that they've won. Like I like seeing a lot of quad 1 wins if you have them, and very few quad 3 or 4 losses. Florida, who you heard is not in my last 4 in, has a quad 4 loss, has probably the worst loss of any team that's a bubble team, losing to Texas Southern at home, a team that was 0-7 at the time and was going on a historic losing streak. And Florida was fully healthy during that game too, might I add. Florida is going to be in the first 4 out. But TCU, 2 wins in the quad 1. They're actually at 500 in quad 1, quad 2 games, 0 quad 3, quad 4 losses, and they have a good chance at 13-4 and then 3-3 in the Big 12, and a really good Big 12 to keep adding some of those quad one wins too. And they had a tough loss to Oklahoma last week. And then Michigan, who started off really slow, a team that I thought was going to be a top 10 team all year long. Here I have them as the number 4 team in the last 4. The last team in the field I have as Michigan. They have one bad quad 3 loss, but they have a very high average win. Their quad 3 wins are barely quad 3. They're almost quad 2 wins. They're in that like gray area, but in the Big Ten, they have so many opportunities to be able to play teams that are tournament caliber. I think they almost eliminate all Northwestern's chances of getting at-larges with a win the other night. Michigan is in, but barely. First 4 out, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Wyoming, and Florida State. Actually, Florida the next 4 out. But Florida State has some impressive wins. Wyoming has an impressive resume. They don't have any bad losses. Like, that's the thing with Wyoming. They have a really high net ranking. Like, net ranking loves Wyoming. Wyoming's 34th in net. No quad 3 or 4 losses. And their quad 1 and 2 record is at 500. They are at, what is it? They are at 3-3 quads 1 and 2. And they have a quad 1 win, which is something North Carolina can't say. The only thing keeping North Carolina out is they don't have a singular quad 1 win. They're 0-6 against quad 1 teams. They are 3-6 on games played away from their home arena. I think that's what's going to hurt them a lot. They have high
Roy Williams, they need help.
Old Roy left, and now they can't win away from the Dean Dome. And like that's the shocking thing about this team. Like, they have all the talent in the world, but they're awful in true road games, including a loss to Miami, who I have in the tournament. A loss to Miami, they got beat by almost 40 points on the road. Like, this team is straight up awful on the road. I think that's what's keeping them out for me. And then Florida State, another borderline ACC team. I just need to see more from Florida State. They just don't have they started off, I think, relatively hot. They have a big win against Duke at home. That's going to help out a lot. And actually, I've kind of been back and forth in my mind between Michigan and Florida State for that last tournament spot. But the loss to South Carolina is gross. The loss to Syracuse is gross. They had a chance to beat Purdue when they played them, but got beat by 30. Like, there's not, and the loss to Florida is gross too, because I don't think Florida's that great of a team. I just got done mentioning how bad I hate their worst loss of the year. The Duke win and the Miami win might be this team's saving grace. And it's the only reason I keep them in the same boat as North Carolina. They'll play North Carolina this year because they're in the same conference, but that's how I have it looking so far. Michigan is the last team in. Florida State, their closest competition. And if North Carolina can get a quad 1 win away from the Dean Dome, they can probably get themselves into ahead of a team like TCU. But that's kind of where we're looking at right now in terms of what the bubble picture looks like.
Elijah, what about St. Bonaventure?
Out completely. I think the Bonnies, that might be the most disappointing team. They brought every single player back in a team that was really good last year, a team that had a chance to beat LSU in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And ever since they won that early season tournament in Charleston, they have taken a complete nosedive. And it's been so disappointing for a team that was so loaded, that's got so much talent. And now I just don't even see them making it in.
Coming into the year when we were doing our top 25 teams, they were like a 26, 27. They were right under there. So, Elijah, you gave your bubble watch candidates. Next week, I'm going to give mine. I'm going to make a graphic. We're going to compare them so we can see what we have. St. Bonaventure, though, I did want to mention them because I actually had them, I think, like at 26, like right under my top 25, my sleepers.
On the cusp.
On the cusp. Really sad. You love seeing those smaller programs, make a run in the tournament, or at least make it into the tournament, because for them, it's a big deal. It's historic for them. But we do have a quick rendition of Give and Go. I've got a quick couple prompts for you, Elijah. Okay, first, we didn't even talk about this game, but Tennessee goes to Lexington. Kentucky beats them by 28 points. They play again in Knoxville on February 15th, a Tuesday night game. Okay, let's hear it. Give and Go. Are you going to give this to Kentucky that they can beat Tennessee again by 20 points, or you think it'll be a closer game?
It'll be a much closer game. And here's why. I think what Kentucky did against Tennessee was obviously flex their offensive prowess. It's a top 5 offensive team in the country because they can score from all 3 parts of the floor. They are consistent shooting, and they're going to be able, when they're not shooting really well, Oscar Tshiebwe is an offensive rebounding machine, and he's going to be able to exploit a lot of mismatches. However, Rick Barnes coached Tennessee teams do really well in the second game. LSU dominated Tennessee defensively in Baton Rouge. They go to Knoxville to play, and Tennessee is able to take some notes away from that, get off to a hot start, and just fend them off the rest of the game. I think Tennessee's shooting the ball a lot better now to be able to withstand that pressure. And it wasn't like Tennessee couldn't score. Like, that's the thing all year, right? Like, we've talked about Tennessee not being able to score at all.
They put up like 80 points.
Yeah, they put up 79 points. And it's like one of those things, if I told you that Tennessee would score 79 points at Rupp, you say, oh, my God, they might have beaten them. No, they almost lost by 30. And that's just because Kentucky had one of the greatest shooting performances in the history of basketball. They shot 61% from 3, 71% from 2, and they were almost at 80% at one point from the entire field in the second half. That's cartoonish.
They were the best team in basketball, in college basketball that night. Nobody could have beat them that night with them shooting like that. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a closer game, but I do think, looking at the rosters, I like more what I've seen from Kentucky this year than what I have seen from Tennessee. I do think Tennessee, though, has a higher ceiling than what they're performing at right now. Just take maybe a couple more games to get in the groove of things. I do think they'll be a tournament team, and never count them out. Never count a Rick Barnes team out, honestly. I know there's been a lot of heat and smoke on him, but people relax. He's not getting fired. He has a good team. The SEC's just gotten that much better in basketball. It's not like he's had any crazy losses that were unacceptable. And this 30-point loss to Kentucky, it's not going to happen again. Like we said, Kentucky was the best team in college basketball that night. Nobody could have beat them. Okay, next. We have had the revolving door on number 1 rated teams this year. Right now, recently Gonzaga was at number 1, and currently holding the crown is Auburn. Okay, I want you to give and go. Tell me which one you believe. Gonzaga is the number 1 team in the country, or Auburn is the number 1 team in the country, if they were to both play each other at this moment.
If they're to both play at this moment, and if I'm an odds maker, I think I'm giving the edge. Man, it's tough. I might be giving the edge to the Zags because they're a better 3-point shooting team. Now, they're really similar in terms of they're both insanely efficient. Like, Auburn offensively is right outside the top 10 in offensive efficiency, but like Jabari Smith, for a guy his size at 6'10", 220-ish, to be able to be a 40% 3-point shooter with like high volume is pretty good. But Gonzaga brings out like 3 or 4 shooters that are 40 plus, around 40 plus % 3-point shooters. They're still an elite inside shooting team. It's the best 2-point shooting team in basketball last year, and they are the best 2-point shooting team in basketball this year. They make about 63% of their twos because they just have like ridiculous size. I love this Gonzaga team. I think the only thing that might stop them is getting enough stops because Auburn is so high-powered offensively. But I think where Gonzaga is so good at shooting the ball and being able to pinpoint where they get their shots from, I'd make Gonzaga like a 2.5-point favorite, but it's not by much.
Yeah, I think that game definitely would be a pick'em. I really wish, obviously this is so far-fetched, but imagine just in college basketball, halfway through the season, you just have the top 10 teams play each other or something in a little round robin tournament. Obviously, so far-fetched. You just sparked my imagination, because it's wouldn't it be so great to see some of these teams play each other that will just not have the chance to play each other during a season or whatever? It would just be amazing, but obviously that's too far-fetched. Okay, lastly, like you said, it's almost February, which means it's almost March for college basketball. Give and go. Will there be more SEC teams in the tournament, or will there be more Big Ten teams in the tournament?
Ooh, that's tough. So as of right now, the SEC teams I have, Arkansas, Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky. So we're sitting at 6. In the Big Ten, I have Purdue, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio State. Go down the line.
Illinois?
Indiana. I have Indiana and Illinois. Yep, I forgot to mention Illinois there as well. So there's at least 7. in the Big Ten. So technically, based off my sheet here, Big Ten has the advantage. Well, at Michigan too, so that's 8.
I was just going to say you had your Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm on the fence on Michigan. My opinion on that might change by tomorrow. I'm so on the fence with them in Florida State.
See, I agree with that. I think the Big Ten has more solid teams in the sense of like they're good. They're not just like amazing teams right now, but they're solid. They've got some good conference wins, above 500. But then like the SEC, you've got like 5 teams that are like on the map. But then the rest of the conference is like Missouri's not making it in, Vanderbilt's not making it in, South Carolina's not making it in, Georgia's not making it in, like definite no's, where I feel as for the Big Ten, you can spread the wealth a little bit and they have more teams that always have a chance of getting in the tournament. Well, there we go. Another edition of Give and Go.
And it's our last episode of Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic until February, which is just next week. I mean, we are in the dog days of college basketball. Resume building season is still here, and it's going to ramp up next week. Really excited to keep doing this as the season goes along. A lot of big things in store for the college basketball season and for this show specifically. So, Michelle, I'm really excited about that and really excited to get this thing cranked up as we're at the most pivotal point of the season right now.
Yeah, you can say that again. This is a really big stretch, especially for teams who are trying to build that resume and make sure that they are going to have a spot in the tournament in March, and some who are just looking to hold on, just keep getting solid wins under their belt, hopefully get higher seeds or, work towards that conference championship. But it should be interesting. I swear every week it's college basketball, so anything can change.
Absolutely. That's the best part of it. Who knows what we'll talk about next week? Who knows how many different teams that I want to have to mark off my last 4 in and first 4 out sheet here, which could be completely useless by next week because of, college basketball. That's all for Courtside of the Campbell and Knezovic. Remember, this is your audio home for college basketball here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Elijah Campbell. She's Michelle Knezovic. Next week, same time, we'll be dropping this episode once again. Excited to have you on board with us this season. We'll talk to you again next week here on Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic.
Peace.